you so much for coming. I really appreciate all the support that we've had with this ad hoc committee. The purpose of this ad hoc committee was to come together on a bipartisan basis, on a basis that doesn't have any preconceived notions or anything on the Blue Ribbon Task Force, to look at everything objectively and formulate a stance that looks in the best interest of the student body in Florida State. That said, the Office of Governmental Affairs is also here to talk about a couple of their recommendations. But what I'd like to say first and foremost is I personally have selected Mrs. Brooke Rennie. She is the director of No Labels at FSU. She has no political affiliation. Her job is to look at things objectively and to come to a consensus in a completely what's the word I'm looking for? Unbiased manner. So Mr. Stokes and I have looked at a few candidates, and we both came to the consideration that Brooke was the best chair for the position, and that we're very happy in selecting her for the chair of the ad hoc committee. So with that, does anyone see notes on their table by chance of the recommendations? I have seen like they're my own personal type. They're up here with other things. Yeah, I just need to check to make sure all the Okay, wonderful. Well, we're ready. Thank you so much, Senate, student body, the community, for coming out. I really appreciate your time and dedicating yourselves to this effort. I would like to personally take this time to thank the student body president, Mr. Ruben Stokes, for having me, and also the Senate president, Mr. Brandon Eichman, for selecting me for this position. I'm really honored to serve you guys and the student body as well as the university, and I'm really honored to serve alongside such great leaders. So thank you very much for that. With that, I'll go ahead and provide my opening statement. We are meeting to create a resolution for the Florida State University stance on recommendations set forth by the Blue Ribbon Task Force on Higher Education. The Blue Ribbon Task Force was created by Governor Rick Scott via Executive Order 12-014 following a veto of the state bill entitled Preeminence. Taken directly from Executive Order 12-104, the vision of the task force shall be to advance the state university system's constitutional charge to operate, regulate, control, and be fully responsible for the management of the whole university system. The mission of the task force will be to review and make recommendations to the governor and state policymakers to fulfill this vision. As such, the task force has provided three main categories of focus: accountability, funding, and governance. Together, under these categories, the task force has fashioned 11 total recommendations for achieving national preeminence and academic and research excellence by Florida universities. These recommendations may be considered for future legislation to advance higher education in the state university system. As the chair of this committee, it is my duty to ensure that all differing perspectives and interests regarding these recommendations are heard, acknowledged, and taken into account during this decision-making process. As leaders, students, and community members in attendance, it is our duty to engage in true civil discourse, which will result in a resolution that is representative of the best interests of the student body, as well as the future of this great institution and community. With that, I ask that each member in attendance will be open to different perspectives and respectful of the other parties during discussion of these recommendations. This meeting will be conducted like a town hall meeting. Each recommendation will be up for discussion. I will open the floor to discussion after each recommendation is read. I will yield to those who would like to discuss the recommendation by recognizing those members who have raised their hands. After the recognized member has made their case, I will allow for a right of replies with recognition from the chair. Once discussion comes to a close, we will motion to vote in favor or against said recommendation. So really, I want this to be a very open discussion, like a town hall. People will come, they will discuss their different perspectives, different viewpoints, be respectful of each other, but really come to common sense, common ground solutions to whatever is being proposed. And honestly, I don't really like formality a whole lot, so we're going to try to just let discussion take the meeting wherever it needs to go. With that, the meeting needs to be effective in pursuing the goals, so there will be a little bit of structure. And although some of you may be really, really passionate, which is great, I ask you just kind of tone down any rhetoric, so any students that are here, anyone who is not, fully engaged in the matter and who's not necessarily a professional on this matter will be able to understand what's being proposed. And with that opening statement, I will yield to Harrison Dubassar, right? Correct pronunciation? Okay. And he will give his opening statement for the Dallas and government workers.
Josh, you want to go on here too? All right, good evening. We're going to excuse the formalities. I only have a few minutes to answer questions. You've all been given ample time, senators, to review the recommendations, to review my report, so with that, I'm open for questions.
On the last page of your report, I think you have recommendation 4 about, on the second last page before your conclusion. So ensure that the board governors have direct involvement in search of the president. You say you're not in favor, please don't say why.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll be able to tell you why. We don't feel that the Board of Governors necessarily has the best interest of all of these state institutions at hand, and so we don't think that they need the absolute direct involvement. Now, whether or not they're involved in some level, it's not, that's not spelled out in my recommendation, but as far as them knowing all of the exact, metrics, all of the exact importance of the university, what's important to each university, to have that direct say in who the president is, we feel that that's not necessary. We feel that each institution knows exactly what they need. And a good example of that would be Dr. Barron. He has his background in meteorology, he has his background in things that are not necessarily the background of the president of the university. And so with that, we thought that, for example, he would have been the right choice for the Board of Governors since he wasn't a long-time educator. And so we don't think that they need to have that direct involvement. Now, they can have some involvement. As far as the direct involvement that's spelled out here, I don't think that's necessary.
Would you then disagree? Because basically their justification for it was the wouldn't trust that people are there. Do you actually see that as inserted for the board?
I'm sorry, can you restate that?
So in their report, they basically say the reason why they want to appoint their own president is because they can't trust people who are there now.
I think that with the recommendation made within their accountability sector, in regards to mission statements especially, I think that they will well serve that purpose without having to have a board of trustees style member selected the president.
In your opening statement, you talk about, so a lot of the statement is kind of restating the recommendations, and there's one point in which you talk about opposition literature that's been brought up. If I can just read from this, you say that it's noted that there's much opposition to certain levels of academia. However, it was also noted that on further research, this opposition did not understand the complexities of the decisions of the task force. So my question to you is, how familiar are you with the literature that's been written by academics? I'm sort of wondering, what sources are you referring to? What academics are you referring to? And why is it that you feel that some people are able to understand the complexities and other people are not able to understand?
Sure. How familiar is that for debate? With regards to the academics, that's about the academics that are following the media, and the media misportrayed a lot of the recommendation where they just did not get the full picture out there.
Could you be more specific? What did they misportray?
Okay. I'm sorry. What did they misportray? You said they misportrayed.
They misportrayed the complexities of the recommendation. They misportrayed the complexities of the needs of everything that was.
Which recommendations can you want?
I'm sorry, I can't stand here.
One example?
Not one example.
I want to just point out is the media and a lot of the articles that I've read have taken a very complex situation, which is whether the Blue Ribbon Task Force comes from. It takes a lot of variables, and it tries to nail it down to a very succinct, very simple answer. And it doesn't go into the issues that are affecting the state university system. Most of the literature hasn't gone into what's really wrong. It's trying to take a very serious, complex issue and make it very simple to the common reader. And we felt that wasn't fair to the situation.
Did you cite an example of an article?
I don't have a Wikipedia page.
Okay. I mean, I'd love to have this conversation.
I can pull, if you would like me to do research and actually give you a cited research paper,
I felt like that's sort of the gist of this.
Senator, with that being said, it's at the end of the beginning introduction. It has nothing to do with the recommendations that are set forth by the Office of Governmental Affairs with regards to the recommendations on task force.
Well, and I don't want to turn this into back and forth, so I'll just kind of wrap up saying, there doesn't seem, this is kind of the only regard for any opposing viewpoints in this entire thing. And so it seems important to, if you are sort of taking a very fairly stern position, for you to have some consideration for what the opposing viewpoints actually said. And so
there is consideration. You'll notice that we did not accept all of the recommendations as they were.
I'm speaking specifically about opposing viewpoints. So you talked about the media, and I'm sort of curious if you actually reflected on resources that were not in line with this recited. And it does, and you kind of get to make it seem like there are actually specific instances that you take into account. So with that, I guess.
Excuse me, as Chair, I'm just going to interject right now, if that's okay, and say that this is an opening statement. He does have prior engagements, and that's why he is able to kind of discuss his stance at this time. But we kind of want to rein in the debate because we do actually have to read the recommendations and make votes on the recommendations. So I just want to make you guys aware that this isn't the end all say all. This is just an opening.
And our goal here as this ad hoc committee is to look at the recommendations with our own eyes as the Senate and formulate our own stance on the Blue Ribbon Task Force recommendations. So just throwing that one out there.
It was just something on your presentation. You said recall President Scott specifically talked about the stance in funding. You talked about $50,000 amount, and you said recall President Scott took a goal that's $10,000.
The degree was with $10,000. Yeah, absolutely. It's with regards to state colleges. We're trying to make a comparison as to where universities will have this sense of preeminence, this sense of, okay, they are more academically enhanced rather than the state colleges. That's where the universities want.
That's what $10,000.
Well, 10,000 would be for that's, if you recall, a couple weeks ago, Governor Scott came out saying that, okay, well, we need to put a $10,000 mark on the state college. That's what it's
Okay, right. That's not sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's nothing concrete. It's just Governor Scott's charge for the 2+2 system. That's what we want to get this out.
Senators, with that, as noted in the bottom of my report, you are more than welcome to set up an appointment with me, and I'm very happy to sit down with you and talk with you as much as possible. But I do have prior engagement, and so I'm happy to meet with you outside of this. Thank you very much. But I will leave it to Deputy Director Cox and Internal Assistant Director Wilner or to answer your questions. Thank you.
Yeah, so I'll be here. Let's try and keep it to kind of technical stuff about actual stances, not so much the defense stuff. Just so that debate. But yeah, settles.
I seem to recall you were sworn in as, I forget your specific position is in Office of Governmental Affairs. I asked very specifically about the nature of how OGA came to its positions on certain policies. And you said that that OGA was to be informed by the position of the student body and not to dictate policy positions to the student body. So I'm curious if that has kind of been kept up with in the issuing of this particular stance. Is my understanding this is OGA's official stance on the Blue Ribbon Task Force?
Yeah, no, it is. Looking at most of the recommendations, they are coming. Mind you, these are recommendations at this point, so we essentially made recommendations on recommendations. There's no bills that have come out, so we can't make a decision on stance against the bill or not.
sort of at the end and just say that when going through these recommendations, once again, this was an opening statement, but as I'm reading through the recommendations and as we were discussing the recommendations, this isn't necessarily about an organization's stance on why it's their stance. We are actually looking at the merit of these recommendations, what the recommendations entail, what's going to happen to the student body, how will we be affected, how can we move forward, what will happen to the community. This isn't necessarily about an individual stance, how they came about it, what politics is involved, it doesn't matter. This is just about us setting the tone of students and saying, okay, as a student body of Florida State University, and as senators and as representatives of the student body, we really want to do what's best for our community with what we've been given with these recommendations. So that being said, if you would like to continue forward.
If I could just remark on that, because I think that's important. So what you're talking about is sort of the end goal of this committee. But this portion of understanding was OGA giving its reflections on the policy, and instead of making a statement, they said we've all had ample time, so we're taking questions. So I'm just sort of trying to respect the nature of sort of this portion.
And respectfully, I'm saying that questions are great. I love open discussion. I'm all for open discussion. But my position as chair is just ensuring that through these open discussions, we're actually getting to some sort of agreement on the recommendations and on our stance of the recommendations, not necessarily how OGA's stance came about, how your stance as a senator came about on each recommendation. Do you understand what I'm saying? I just want to make it clear that we're looking at the actual recommendations, and yes, they're going over their stance. They're doing an overview. I understand that. They're just giving an opening, kind of a taste for what they're doing. But, we do need to move forward. I want them to have a chance to, open. But we do need to move forward with the recommendations and actually discuss this on the recommendation, not necessarily just their stance, because honestly, we're all working together in this. It's not one person's stance over another. We're coming to common solutions and common ground negotiations. That's what we're trying to get at here. So,
yes, I have a quick comment about that and then a question about this. So, it seems that looking at any stance necessarily requires that we look at the reasoning behind the stance, and you mentioned merit. Merit has to be based on value or reason. So there is something to be said for comparing one stance and an alternative stance. And it's not just a recommendation based on nothing. There are reasons. So I just want to say that it's very crucial to look at the reasons.
And the Senate can formulate their own stance, which is what the purpose of the ad hoc is. We just want to get a basis for what OGA is to say.
Should have reason to say otherwise.
The reason behind it is to the benefit of the student.
Exactly. Right, exactly. That is what needs to be discussed. What is a true benefit to the actual
and that's what I'm trying. That's what I'm trying to say whenever I'm addressing this, as it's not necessarily about their stance, because guys, we have 11 recommendations to go through, line by line by line. I mean, this, and it'll be an open floor discussion. Everyone can have their piece, and that's what we want to accomplish here. We want, this collaborative group effort to say, okay, we can declare this stance as a student body and feel great about it. That's what we want to accomplish here. And I understand that each stance, yes, maybe it is important, but for right now, we're just giving them their time to say what they need to say, so we can open the floor to discussion and everyone knows, kind of what's, I guess, going on. And that's as simple as I can put it without going into any further debate, because frankly, it doesn't need to be debated.
So the question I had, just this, we also talked about the actual tuition should be implemented in 15 universities. I was just a little, I think I know it, that, but I wasn't.
Okay, thanks for that. So, Florida State, top 100 in public universities. UCF, top. UCF and Florida State, which is
to close the floor, actually, and go recommendation by recommendation. You can finish your last question, but this is just a strict overview question. Is there anything you're just unclear on about, wording or whatever? This isn't actually going over, in depth with the recommendations, because we're going to do that recommendation by recommendation. I just want to let you know that you will have the opportunity, and I'm not trying to cut you off. We just need to have an effective meeting, and this isn't the way.
This whole debate is meant, as she said, to draw a common ground. And like you said, you're very, very accurate in your statement. This is about where you place value as a student. And as OGA, we're representing the student body. I feel that, and OGA feels that as a majority of the student body, you want to place your value while you're going to school. We're trying to make the value of our degree higher. I think everyone can agree on that. That's why we're in school, to add something to our communities. And that's not just saying based on salary, and that's based on everything. So I think that this debate should be used not to argue stances, because we can argue value percentages all day long. It's to have some common ground with these issues and agree with some of them, disagree with some of them, and move forward.
Okay, so with that, I will go ahead and read the first recommendation and then open up. Under the category of accountability, the first recommendation is to enhance the metrics-based accountability framework as a management and decision-making tool. Institutional and system-wide levels should be consistent with Governor Scott's emphasis bulleted below, as well as those developed by Complete College America and embraced by the National Governors Association. So those subpoints include A, percentage of graduates employed or continuing education; B, bachelor's degrees in areas of strategic emphasis; C, cost per graduate and cost to graduates; and D, salary of graduates. And with the recommendation being read, I will open the floor to discussion on this recommendation. Unless there is no discussion to be had, then we can move to a motion to vote for or against this recommendation. You recognize, Senator?
So I think that there's, in the kind of some of the opening remarks in the recommendations, it's pointed out, and again, this is going to return to, that this is a complex system. And we have to be careful not to oversimplify it. But the aim that follows is sort of read as very much just simply pursuing economic impact of the state university system. And they say specifically it should not be unidimensional, but saying that we should just simply optimize the economic aspect of a state university system, which has not just economic, but social and cultural value that it's putting into the state, seems very much exactly like what the task force itself warned against, a unidimensional take on a very complex system. So to have these metrics be what later are suggested guide all funded when power is handed over to the Board of Governors, seems very detrimental. And I would love if they would sort of be able to see that this is in fact the thing that they've warned us against. So these metrics are very performance based. They're very simple, and they're very sort of evocative of the kind of metrics that are being used to evaluate our public school system, and that widely acknowledged the public school system is being failed by funding being based on FCAT, different things like that. So these overly simplified metrics being tied inherently to funding seem to be demonstrably overly simplified as far as how they affect the public school system. So to me, very much saying these few metrics should be the determiners overall of funding for all state universities seems incredibly detrimental, and it's not at all obvious that, or data-based. These recommendations are not data-driven. It's not obvious at all that these will actually be useful metrics.
Is there a reply to that?
The university system in Florida is a business. The metrics that you talk about are data-driven. They've been reported. And as a business, you You need concrete data to drive that. These socio-cultural statistics that you speak of, can you measure that accurately? That's not how business is driven. So with that,
Senator, could you provide an alternative recommendation? If you don't agree with this recommendation, is there any alternative that you could recommend in reference to anything other than a metric-based accountability system?
Sorry, question.
No, sorry.
No, I think that it's a false solution. One of the issues that I take with these recommendations is that they don't anywhere actually address the issues that are pressing for the state university system. When you talk to educators, well, the number one problem is a lack of state funding. And if you say that funding can only be tied, reasonably or responsibly through these performance metrics, then I ask, how is it that FSU has become the nation's most cost-efficient university without having adhered to these metrics prior? Now, when you say, we need to, she said that these measurements exist. Well, they're proposing that this data be provided to the Board of Governors. It doesn't actually yet. But one of the big issues that I take with this is, okay, if I, for some reason, wanted to concede and say, yes, let's simply evaluate the state university system for its economic impact, the Board of Governors themselves in February put out a report, the economic impacts of the state university system. And I guess I have a question. So they don't actually use any of the data, but it's everything that they mean to be talking about. They cite none of that data. And if I could just ask, is the Office of Governmental Affairs familiar with the Board of Governors February report?
I've read it, and I'm not as familiar with that.
Okay, well, it's really delightful, actually. It paints a beautiful picture of what the state university system does for the state of Florida. There's a 20-to-1 return on state dollar investments that the state university system exhibits right now, even in this crisis. And the GDP impact of the state university system is sitting at, this is the Board of Governors estimate, right about $80 billion. That's almost 8% of the state's GDP. Tourism, often touted as one of the biggest industries in the state, comes in about $67 billion. So I think it's a false problem saying that our universities don't. When you ask if I have a solution, I don't think it's broken, and I think that these recommendations would in fact break something that's only broken because of a lack of funding. I don't think that.
And those are the things that, honestly, sir, we need to hear. See, we need to know, okay, are these recommendations, good? Are they bad? Why are they bad? Why are they good? Is it broken already? And that's a great point that you bring up. Is it something we should address? But that's how this meeting, should go. And I just want to encourage that. I want to encourage this sort of discussion. But, versus necessarily debating, I want to talk about how to draw common solutions. So, yes, I'm sorry.
First, I'd state, I'm supposed to say that anything I say is my personal opinion, not the opinion of the board of OGA. But when you get the distinction, okay, so back to the last point. I don't view these recommendations as trying to fix a broken system. I think these recommendations are trying to improve the system that's already in place. I think that as a good opinion. But the main issue that I want to bring up is, so we're all here to represent Florida State students. If anybody has anything I'm saying drastically wrong, please interject. We're here to represent Florida State students. We have been widely recognized as a school that is very efficient with the limited dollars we have. We don't have very many dollars, but we use them very, very well. That's the end, I don't think, up for debate. So the majority of these recommendations are saying give more money to the people who use their money well. So with these efficiency-based metrics, and Florida State University being one of the most efficient universities in the country, wouldn't it lead that if we're funding things based on efficiency, that Florida State would come out good? I really think that would be beneficial to Florida State. And that's kind of where I'm thinking at, is if we're doing efficiency-based metrics, and we are the most efficient university in the country, I think we've come out pretty good on that, to be honest. I think
would you recognize Mr. Duncan?
I'd just like to ask, so what would be a good way to base the accountability for management and decision-making at the university? I mean, if it's not the percentage of graduates employed, bachelor's degrees in areas of strategic emphasis, cost per graduate and cost to graduates, and salary of graduates, I mean, what would be the best way to gauge accountability? I mean, I just want to provoke debate, you know.
Sure. I would say, is there a way to sit, or should I say?
Oh, no, you're fine.
Okay. Basically, well, the metrics aren't necessary. That's just it. They're, or at least in my opinion, they're a false solution to something, to a crisis that is of our own making. The state is not funding education. It needs to. What these metrics are a political attack by an extremist right-wing government on the education system, in my opinion. For instance, metric B, bachelor's degrees in areas of strategic emphasis. Basically what this is saying is, we will give you more money if you get rid of the social sciences and humanities. See, the cost per graduate and cost of graduates is basically saying you need to do cost cutting. So what this means is more online classes, larger class sizes, more overworked adjunct faculty. D, the metric salary of graduates is making education about money, but that's not what education is about.
One second, Brooke. After looking at rules of procedure, ma'am, in the back videotaping, you have violated section 2.09 of rules of procedure, which means you have to notify the chair that you are recording. So, just letting you know.